It's Algebra 2, test number 10 through lesson 5.5, completing the square. First one says factor the expression. Now we have something that says 6x squared plus 4x plus 10. You have to take out what they all have in common. The first thing they all have in common is the number 2. You can divide everything by 2. So 2 times 3x squared will give you 6x squared. 2 times 2x and 2 times 5 will give you 10. So you don't even have to concern yourself with the fact that you divided everything by 2. Factor out this part. 3x times x gives you 3x squared. There's only one pair of factors for 5, 1 and 5. So you have to put them in the order. It's either going to put you're either going to put a 1 here and a 5 here. You have to put it in the order. That way when you FOIL it out, you're going to get back to this number b right here, 2. 3 times 5 is going to give you 15. And 2 times 1 is going to give you 2. 15 minus 2, or 15 minus 1 in this case, it's just going to be 1 times 1, is going to be 14. That's too much. So what you have to do is you have to reverse the order and put your 5 first, or your 5 first, and then your 1. So now what you have when you, is you check the signs. This one still tells you that they're either going to be the same or different. That one tells you it's positive, so they're going to be the same. This one tells you since they're both the same, it's going to be plus. So when you FOIL this out, now 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 1 is 3x. 5x times 5 is going to be 5x, and 5 times 1 will be 5. Number 2 says 20x squared plus 15x. Take out what they have in common again. They both have a 5 and an x in common. 5 times 4 gives you 20, and x times x gives you x squared. Plus 5 times 3 gives you 15, and x times 1, so simply 5x times 3 to get 15x. This is considered factor. Okay, then you factor in a trinomial. This was one that has its a value is 1, unlike number 1. So you just simply write x times x to get x squared. You want to take c's value, 18, and look at your pairs of 18. 1 times 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. Which one of those pairs will get you to b's value, 11? The only one that's going to get you to 11 is 2 and 9. So you have to use those numbers, 2 and 9. This sign in front of C tells you they're going to be the same sign. This tells you they're both going to be plus. So plus 2 and plus 9. Same thing with number 4. You have x squared. There's no a value except 1, so x times x. And then your pairs of 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. So it's got to be one of those pairs. The only one that gets you to the number 6, the b value, is 2 and 4. So you got to use that one. This tells you they're going to be the same sign. This tells you both of those signs are going to be negative. So minus 2 and minus 4. Same thing with number 5. You have coefficient of 1 on your x squared, so x times x. Your pairs of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay, which pair is going to get you to this b value, knowing that this b value is 1? Okay, the only one that gets you to 1. The first pair gets you 1 and 12, either gets you 11 or 13. This one either gets you 4 or 8. This is the only one, 3 and 4. That's going to get you to the number 1. So you have to use 3 and 4. This tells you they're different. This is the first one where they have different signs. This one tells you since they're different, the larger absolute value is going to be positive. So 4 is bigger than 3, so plus. And the 3 is smaller, it's negative. Now 6 and 7 are both special circumstances. 6 is a perfect trinomial. You can take the square root of a, the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of c, square root of 9 is 3. You can take the sign in front of b and say that they're plus, and it's squared. So anytime you have a perfect trinomial, this is something we do when we complete the square. You take the square root of a and c, put the sign in front of b, and then square it. Number 7 is the difference of two perfect squares. Again, you can take the square root of this one. 9x squared is 3x, and the square root of this one is 2. Now, it's the difference of two perfect squares. This is where it's a little bit different than when you do the trinomial. Since it's the difference, that means one of them is going to be plus The other one is going to be minus. So 3x plus 2 and 3x minus 2. Number 8 says simplify the square root of negative 112 using the imaginary number I. Remember, all you have to do to take the negative out is multiply it by I. So now you have I times the square root of 112. Okay? The square root of 16 multiplies by something to give you 112. It multiplies by 7. The square root of 16, you can't forget there's an I here. The square root of 16 is 4 times the square root of 7. And then that I comes down and multiplies by 4. So simply 4I times the square root of 7. Again, the same thing, but you want to make sure it's in standard form or in the form a plus bi. Okay, so take the negative out first. I times the square root of 36. You know that that's I times 6 because the square root of 36 is 6. Plus 7. So if you want to write it to make it say a plus bi, the plus 7 part is the a. So 7 plus or minus 6i. Because remember, when you're talking about square roots, it's either plus or minus. In fact, you can go back to this one and say that this is both positive and negative 4i times the square root of 7. This one you're going to do the same thing. 1 minus I times the square root of 8. In order to break down the square root of 8, it's 4 times 2. So still 1 minus I times that, or 1 minus I times 2. Since the square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 2. So it's going to be both 1 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 2. Solving this equation, what you're going to do is, this is a perfect trinomial again. So take the square root of that and get x, the square root of that and get 9. This tells you plus between them, x plus 9 squared equals 49. Undo the fact that this says x squared by taking the square root. If you do it to the left, do it to the right. Now you have x plus 9 equals the square root of 49 is both 7 and negative 7, positive or negative. Undo plus 9 by subtracting it, do it to the positive and the negative value. X is equal to 7 minus 9 is negative 2. Negative 7 minus 9 is negative 16. Both numbers, negative 2 and negative 16. Number 12 is a simple equation, just has variables on both sides. Bring the smaller 4y over by subtracting it. If you subtract it from the left, subtract it from the right, that gives you 1y. It's positive, so you have negative 16 plus that equals, you still have 1 on the other side. Move the negative or minus 16 over by adding 16 to both sides. You add it to the right, add it to the left. 1 plus 16 is 17. That cancels out y's value in this linear equation for number 12 is 17. Negative 6y plus 13 equals negative 4 times y plus 5. Distribute. Negative 4 times y, negative 4y. Negative 4 times 5 minus 20. Now it just turns into number 12. Negative 6y plus 13. We'll do it a little bit quicker. Move your smaller negative 6y over by adding 6y to both sides. It gives you 2y. Move your negative 20 to the other side by adding 20 to both sides. 13 plus 20 is going to be 33. Undo 2 times something by dividing. There's no number that goes into both of those. So 33 over 2 is going to be your simplified version. Undo minus 1 by adding 1 to both sides. 2 equals x over 8. Undo divide by 8 by multiplying by 8 on both sides. 8 times 2 is 16. Undo positive 6 by subtracting it on both sides. 8n equals 32. Undo times 8 by dividing by 8 on both sides. N is 4. Distribute 6y plus 30 equals 90. Subtract 30 on both sides. 6y equals 60. Divide by 6 on both sides. Y equals 10. Notice I'm just showing the solution steps without the arithmetic. 17. This time we're finding C. In order to find C, take B's value divided by 2 and square it. It says ax squared plus bx plus c is the one we're looking for. So c is 16 divided by 2, which is 8. And 8 divided by 8 squared is going to be a positive 64 for c. Okay, for number 18 and 19, we're solving these by completing the square. In order to do that, you have to move the positive 13 over by subtracting it. This is algebra 1. Subtract it on both sides. X squared plus 8x plus c equals negative 13. So find b just like on number 17. Take your b, find c, take your b value, which is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is plus 16. Remember, you have to add 16 to both sides, though. So that's a perfect trinomial. Take the square root of that's x. The square root of that is 4. This sign tells you it's going to be in the middle. X plus 4 squared equals negative 13 plus 16 is going to be a positive 3. Almost finished. Undo this squaring something by taking the square root. X plus 4. So if you take the square root of that side, it cancels out, leaves you with x plus 4. You have to take the square root of the other side, so you get the square root of 3. We can't simplify that one. So all you have to do is undo the fact that it says plus 4 by subtracting 4, subtract it from the other side. We can't take it away from the square root of 3. All you can do is write it next to it. So x is going to be equal to negative 4, both plus or minus the square root of 3. This is one of those instances where you don't have to write both of them out because it's not going to change the answer. Do the same thing with number 9. Move this plus 47 over because it won't make a perfect trinomial. You have to subtract it on both sides. So now what we have is x squared plus 12x plus our new value of c, which we're going to get, is going to be equal to negative 47 because you have to undo the plus 47. Remember to find c, take b's value, which is 12, divide it by 2 and you get 6, and then square it and you get positive 36. Remember to add 36 to the other side. Negative 47 plus 36, you have to subtract them. 47 minus 36 is going to be 11, and keep that negative since 47 was a higher absolute value. Remember, for the other side, take the square root of a. Since it's perfect trinomial now, you get x, and the square root of that c value we just found, and you get 6. The sign in front of b tells you to put plus in the middle, so you have x plus 6 squared equals negative 11, and then solve it just like we did on number 18. Undo squaring something by taking the square root of it. Take the square root of the other side. We now have x plus 6 equals the square root of a negative 11. Remember, in order to take the negative out of the radical, you have to multiply it by the imaginary number I. So I times the square root of 11, that's all we did right there. X plus 6 on the left-hand side. Let's undo plus 6 by subtracting 6. If you do it there, do it on the other side. Make it say a plus bi like we do. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 11 times I, times that imaginary number I. Number 20, we want to rewrite it in vertex form. We got to do the same thing as far as completing the square. Move 16 over. I know 16 is a perfect square, and you can take the square root of it and get 4, but you won't get to b's value 10 or negative 10. So we have to move it over. So now we have y minus 16 equals x squared minus 10x plus c. Okay, we need to find a new value of c. Take b's value, negative 10, divided by 2, you get negative 5. Square that and you get plus 25 or positive 25. Remember to put it on both sides, though. Negative 16 plus 25 is going to be a positive 9. So now we got y plus 9 on that side equals the square root of this one is x. The square root of this one is 5. This tells you to put minus in the middle. So now you have x minus 5 squared, almost in vertex form. The only thing you have to do now is move the plus 9 over by subtracting it and do it to the other side. Y equals x minus 5 squared minus 9. That is vertex form. And remember, your vertex, it doesn't ask you for it in this question, but your vertex is the opposite of what you see in parentheses for x. So instead of negative 5, it would be 5. And it's exactly what you see outside the parentheses for y, negative 9. So 5, negative 9 is what your vertex would be. Solve the equation by finding square roots. First thing you need to do is undo 5 times something by dividing it. Now you have x squared equals 6. Undo x squared by taking the square root. X equals plus or minus the square root of 6, because there's no perfect square that we can reduce that with. Number 22 says simplify the radical by rationalizing the denominator. That just means whatever's at the bottom multiplied by whatever that is over itself. So 4 times the square root of 3 when you multiply straight across. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Remember, anytime you multiply the same thing by itself, just take that radicand out at the bottom, whatever that number is. Or you can multiply it out and see that you get the square root of 9, which simplifies back down to 3. Multiply and simplify if possible. And there's 2 different ways to do this. You can take the square root of 30 and multiply it by the square root of 3 and get the square root of 90. And then you could separate that knowing that there's certain numbers that go into it to simplify it. Or you could ask yourself, is there a factor of 3 in 30? The square root of 3 multiplies by the square root of 10. Even though neither one of those is a perfect square, it allows us, when we bring this one down, to simplify by multiplying the same radical by itself. Same thing. If you multiply the same radical by itself, whatever that number is, it's 3 times the square root of 10. So that's just a shortcut to where you don't have to fool with the perfect squares. Number 24 is simply foiling. Remember, FOIL tells you to do the first 2 terms. 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. The O stands for outer 2 terms. 8 times positive square root of 10, so plus 8 square root of 10. The I stands for the inner 2 terms. Negative times a negative, remember, is going to be a positive 5 times the square root of 10. And then the L stands for last. Negative times a positive is going to be a negative, but we're multiplying the same radical by itself again, 10 and 10. Remember, that just means to take it out and call it negative 10. Or you could say the square root of 100, which is going to go back to negative 10. So now just combine your like terms. Negative 40 combines with negative 10. Same sign. Add them up. 40 plus 10 is 50, and keep the sign negative. Negative 50. 8 times the square root of 10 plus 5 times the square root of 10 is going to be plus 13 times the square root of 10. This is your simplified version. 25 is real simple. This is algebra 1 stuff. 2 times negative 3y is negative 6y. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4 plus 9y. Combine your y's, negative 6y and positive 9y. You have to subtract them. 9 minus 6 is going to be 3y minus 4 is your simplified version. Same thing with this other one. Square 6 inside. Remember, do what's inside parentheses first and work your order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally once you're inside. 6 squared is going to be 36 plus negative 5. Still inside parentheses right there. Subtract them. 36 minus 5 is 31. Do what's inside parentheses on the other one. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And that's going to be cubed. So now cube what's outside, since you don't multiply before you cube. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Negative 4 times negative 2 is going to be times negative 8. They're right next to each other. 31 times negative 8. A positive times a negative is a negative. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. Negative 248. 27 says 4f of x equals negative 5x minus 1. Find f of negative 1. So of negative 4. F of negative 4 equals negative 5 times negative 4 minus 1. Simplify that. Negative times a negative is a positive. Minus 1. F of negative 4 equals that. So f of negative 4, you don't undo the fact that that f's right next to it, equals 20 minus 1 is 19. And then it says to graph this one. Y equals, just to see if you remember, mx plus b. B tells you to begin at 1, 2. So that's where you want to put your first term on your y-intercept at 2. M's value is 2 over 5. That means go up 2 and go right 5. So up 1, 2 more, and right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So up 2 and to the right 5 is going to be your second point. And when I graph a line through both of those, your graph should look just like that.